My name's Jonathan Gribbin. I'm the Director of Public Health for Nottinghamshire County, and I'd like to tell you about the COVID-19 Local Outbreak Control Plan for Nottinghamshire. It's all about containing the virus so that we can protect one another, safeguard our critical services, and enable our schools, our workplaces, our communities to flourish again. And the plan describes how we will do that in Nottinghamshire. It complements the national test and trace arrangements, and it builds on local arrangements with key partners like Public Health England, the district and borough councils, the city council and our local NHS. It identifies a range of settings such as schools, workplaces, universities, care homes and so on, which require specific plans to deal with any fresh outbreaks of the virus. It describes how we'll be monitoring on a daily basis to spot if there are any new outbreaks, and then coordinating action to investigate and deal with them, deploying extra testing capacity if we need to, or contact tracing as appropriate. The plan also deals with how we will continue to provide support for people who are made vulnerable because they need to self-isolate, and we'll be doing that through our community support hub. And we'll refine the plan as we go along to reflect the latest best practice and the information which government will be providing to the council. Finally, I want to acknowledge the lengths to which so many people and organisations have gone to already in recent months to stick with the guidance, to maintain social distancing of 2 metres wherever possible, to wash your hands thoroughly and frequently, to stay at home if you or someone in your household has symptoms, to get tested and to follow the advice that you receive when you get the result. By observing the guidance, you're protecting not only your own life and livelihood, that of your friends and also your loved ones, but also that of people you may never meet, but people who you're depending on and whom we must each depend as well. Your role in that is critical. Thank you for your help to contain the virus.
Hello, my name's Jonathan Gribbin and I'm the Director of Public Health for Nottinghamshire, and I lead the county's response to COVID-19. None of us want our children to miss out on all of the benefits that school brings. So I want to let you know just how hard our schools have been working to ensure that they've all got in place the sensible precautions to receive back pupils at the start of the new year. But of course, all of us need to play our part in stopping the spread. So alongside the guidance you know about already, I also want to urge you to follow the guidance on safe travel to school. Please walk or cycle, or if a car journey really is essential because you live more than 2 miles from school, please arrange drop-offs well away from the school itself. You can find out more details about this and about all of the other government guidance on our website. If you've any questions about plans or arrangements at a particular school, then the school itself will be the best place to answer them. Thank you for watching.
The 3 words I'd use to describe my role is team, rewarding and challenging.
Positive, team, supportive.
3 words I'd use to describe this job: gratifying, inspirational, challenging. Before this, I was a hairdresser, but I wanted to do more than make people feel good. I wanted to help change their lives. I'm now part of a team that does exactly that every day.
I spend my days talking to the residents of Nottinghamshire, their families, and the support services that help them on a day-to-day basis.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Goldstraw, and I am the chair of the Nottinghamshire Police and Crime Panel. Can I welcome everyone to today's meeting, which is being held virtually and streamed live to the internet in line with the requirements of the Coronavirus Act 2020. Please do bear with us if we run into any technical difficulties today. The meeting will be adjourned temporarily if the live stream is broken at any point. In addition to myself, I'd like to inform you of all the members who are participating today. Vice Chair, Councillor David Ellis, my 3 independent co-opted members, Leslie Dolby, Suma Harding and Bob Vaughan Newton, and elected members, the Executive Mayor of Mansfield, Councillor Andy Abrahams, Councillor Michael Edwards of Nottingham City Councillor, Councillor Scott Carlton of Newcombe Sherwood District, Councillor Tony Eaton of Bassett Law District Council, Councillor Rob Inglis of Rushcliffe Borough Council, Councillor Ray McRae of Broxstoke Borough Council, Councillor Helen Ann Smith of Ashfield District Council. And as well as those members, we also have the Commissioners team, Paddy Tipping, the Police and Crime Commissioner, Emma Fooding, the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner. Welcome, Emma. This is your first formal meeting, so we hope it goes well for you. Craig Guilford, the Chief Constable of Nottinghamshire, Kevin Dennis, the Chief Executive of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and Charlie Radford, Chief Finance Officer, also of the Commissioner's Office. The panel has support officers with us today, Keith Ford and Peter Barker. As well as these attendees, we're also joined today by a number of guests who are attending to participate in the domestic violence agenda item. And I'm delighted to welcome them here today. Anna Clark, Chief Executive of Equation, Mandy Green, Head of Services, Nottinghamshire Women's Aid, Yasmin Riemann, Chief Executive of Juno Women's Aid, Jane Lewis, Community Safety Strategy Manager of the Crime and Drugs Partnership, and Rebecca Aitchison, Senior Public Health and Commissioning Manager at Nottinghamshire County Council. Well, welcome one and all. Can I just ask a little bit of cooperation whilst we run this virtual meeting? We're aware that not all members have the raise your hand facility to indicate they may want to speak. So try and attract our attention, shout if you need to, or wave your hand, and hopefully we will see you and you'll be able to have your say. Before just moving on to the formal agenda, I do want to once again welcome the visitors. We were planning this event way back in the winter time with the expectation that this would take place at our March meeting, and we were very much looking forward to meeting and greeting these people in real life as opposed to the digital format we're all used to today. So I hope that it's a good opportunity, not quite as good as being able to welcome you live and shake your hands and look at the displays you're going to give us, but we hope that it's a good and successful meeting for you. With no further ado now, I'd like to move to the agenda. Can the minutes of the last meeting be agreed as a true record and accurate record, please?
Agreed.
Any seconder? I'll propose that from the chair. Thank you. Item 1B is the minutes of the confirmation hearing held on the 1st of June, pages 13 to 22 in your bundle. Can I have confirmation that those minutes are agreed as a true and accurate record?
Agreed.
Thank you. We do have some apologies for absence. Mr. Ford, if you could help us.
Yeah, certainly. So we've received apologies for absence today from Councillor Linda Woodings, and Councillor Michael Edwards is attending as her substitute. We've had apologies from Councillor Jason Zadrodsny, and Councillor Helen Ann Smith is attending as his substitute. And we've also received apologies from Councillor Leslie Ayola. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now move to agenda item number 3, declarations of interest by members and officers. Are there any pecuniary interests that need to be disclosed? I'm taking silence as no. And B, any private interests, either pecuniary or non-pecuniary, in any items on the agenda? Thank you very much. So that takes us then to the first important item on our agenda, item 4, which is the domestic violence update. Before starting, can I now move on to the first substantive item? And prior to introducing this and handing over to the Commissioner, I would just like to formally move the recommendation, which I understand the Vice Chair will second.
Yeah, formally second and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Commissioner, we've all had an opportunity to read the executive summary, and I know some members have endeavoured to work their way through the more formal full report that's been received. And can we thank all the people who've participated in that, and particularly the authors of the report for a tremendous piece of work. Will you be presenting this, or are you handing over to your Deputy, Commissioner?
So, Christine, just a few words from me, and then Emma will take the panel through this. Compared to many others, we're in quite a good place in that although there's been budget cuts, by and large, with the help of the City and the County Council and some of the districts, we've been able to maintain our spending in this area. But there comes a time when you need to refresh your plans, and that's what we've been doing for some months, as you rightly pointed out. The documents come from my office, but the force have been very involved in this, and I know the Chief Constable will be happy to answer questions if necessary. I'm delighted that we've got some of the Commission's services on the line as well. Equation, Nottinghamshire Women's Aid and Juno Women's Aid are all good and strong partners. This is a draft report that we're putting out for consultation after the panel's discussed it today, and we hope to complete the work in November. I mean, I think it is the case that the pandemic has given fresh thought around this area, and we need to react to that. We need to be conscious too of the needs of the BAME communities, and we may talk about Black Lives Matter later on our agenda. But with that, if you're happy, Christine, I'll hand over to Emma, who's carried the bulk of this work.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and welcome, Emma.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. It's really good to see you all. Apologies, we're getting a little bit of feedback.
Could I ask as many people as possible just to turn off the...
I think what it might be, Emma, are you in the same office as the Commissioner at the minute? Yeah, it could be if you're both got your speaker. If Paddy tries muting his mic, that might solve it.
We'll give that another go.
No. The other option would be a headset as well. If one of you is able to plug a headset in, that should solve the problem.
Keith, it's Kevin, or alternatively, Emma or Paddy can move into my office and there'll be a separation then, if that doesn't work.
Thank you. We'll just pause whilst we sort out the technical glitches.
How's that, Emma?
I was going to say that seems to be okay.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
To solve it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, take two. So as I said, it's really good to see you all again today, and to be bringing a paper on the important issue of domestic abuse and our response to it in Nottinghamshire. Since Paddy was first elected, domestic abuse has been a priority of his and this office, and when he asked me to be his deputy, it's one of the areas which he wanted me to take forward so that we could, as he said, kind of refocus on it and refresh our approach to it. Domestic abuse is an incredibly significant issue facing our communities, and we're going to continue to do all that we can to tackle it. This paper provides an opportunity to step back and look at the response that currently takes place in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire and see how it can be improved. And before I go on any further, I would just like to take a moment to thank all of our providers on the call today, along with the leads for domestic abuse from our local authorities. You all work tremendously hard to support survivors and to tackle domestic abuse in our communities, and the response that we're currently able to provide is a testament to the hard work that you do. This paper builds on our local joint strategic needs assessments and also the police and crime needs assessment to further our understanding of exactly what's happening in relation to domestic abuse in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. And it brings a fresh perspective on a whole system approach. We cannot consider one element of our response around domestic abuse without thinking about the wider system, as all the elements depend on one another. It's been developed with national, force and provider data, and with input from specialist domestic abuse leads in our local authorities. As mentioned, it's a final consultation draft, and we welcome your comments and your questions on the report. And we know that domestic abuse isn't just a priority of ours here, it's a priority for Nottinghamshire Police and for all our local authorities as well. So domestic abuse is obviously a huge topic, and there's a lot in the report, as you'll have seen, and hopefully I'm just today basically going to pull out some of the highlights of that, if you like. So as I said, hopefully you've been able to read through the executive summary, if not the full report itself. But I also just want to make the point that domestic abuse, particularly in the COVID context at the moment, is a constantly evolving picture and landscape. And by the end of the consultation, it may well be that there are parts of the report which are in a different place to when it was originally authored, which is something that we ultimately just need to accept. So the first point to make is that the force's threat assessment on domestic abuse, given its prevalence, and given the harm that it can cause, is high. However, what the report demonstrates is that whilst there are always areas for improvement, the response to domestic abuse here is a strong one, and that's in no small part due to the highly developed ecosystem of providers, agencies, commissioners, all working together in partnership. So there isn't time today to go through all of the data that's in the report, but there are some emerging trends which I think it's important to highlight. These include the increasing prevalence of financial and emotional abuse rather than physical abuse. And in addition, we're seeing a greater use of technology as a means of perpetrating abuse. The use of knives in domestic homicides is something else which has been noted. And in addition, providers are reporting a number of issues to us, including increased complexity of cases and growing numbers of adolescents perpetrating violence against their parents. The force's identification rate for domestic abuse has risen significantly in recent years. Although we're slightly lower than most similar police forces, in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, we consistently record a higher level of DVA-related crimes per capita than the East Midlands average. And local demand for barracks continues to rise, and our police positive outcome rate is stronger than the regional and national average also. The report highlights that we have got strong arrangements in place already to tackle domestic abuse in all parts of the system, and specifically, Paddy continues to co-commission evidence-based activity, which includes prevention activity in schools, workforce training and development, campaigns and awareness training, holistic support services for women and men and children, which include the DSVA helpline, MARIC, court and teen IDVAs, and other ongoing support. In 2018 to 19, over 3,500 women, men and children accessed support from these services, and in 29 to 20, our helplines received over 11,000 calls. Additionally, other prevention activity through the VRU to support children who've been affected by domestic abuse involving a knife, and our IOM scheme to manage the top 40 perpetrators within the county. Grassroots community projects also to tackle abuse in particular communities. Paddy's investment in tackling domestic abuse this year is £1.1 million out of his wider Victims and Community Safety Commissioning budget, which, when including national funding, is around £7 million. And on top of that, during COVID, he managed to secure an additional £316,000 for domestic abuse support services in our area. We are exceptionally proud of the excellent support services that are currently in place. However, as you can imagine, we cannot be complacent with an issue like this, and there's always going to be more to do. Demand's very high for support, and despite investment into domestic abuse, there's always a need for services to grow. Some groups are underrepresented in terms of the service take-up at the moment, which includes male survivors and also some BAME survivors. And whilst our IDVA provision is the highest in the East Midlands, local refuge provision is low, and over 40% of it's funded nationally. Whilst the new DVA bill provides a helpful focus on accommodation, if it doesn't come with sufficient funding attached to it, there are going to be some difficult choices ahead for us here. In common with other areas, we also know that there's more to do in terms of tackling perpetrators. The national evidence base is quite mixed, and it's clear that any scheme must be properly tailored and meet good practice criteria to ensure that it will do no harm. Paddy's already been funding a DVA integrated offender management scheme since 2017, with the scheme working with the top 40 perpetrators in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, and has demonstrated good results in terms of reducing reoffending and harm. The Home Office has recently opened up a new fund opportunity for perpetrator programmes, and we're going to be submitting a bid informed by the forthcoming perpetrator literature review that Paddy's commissioned through the VRU. In terms of COVID and domestic abuse, the last 6 months or so have been really challenging for everyone. The COVID restrictions have put greater pressure on families and reduced opportunities for survivors to be able to seek help. And that's been evident in the demand on our DVA helpline, with demand currently running at around 50% higher than we would expect it to. All of our commissioned DVA support services, not just the helpline, are facing significantly increased demand. During the lockdown, we took swift action to address domestic abuse, with Nottinghamshire Police implementing the silent solution for 99 calls in Nottinghamshire, and Paddy underwriting additional funding for the helpline to be able to increase its capacity. As well as that, as mentioned, the 316,000 additional emergency COVID funding for DVA providers was sought, although we're going to have to work closely with the city and county as the lead commissioners going forward. It's too soon at the moment to assess COVID's full impact on domestic abuse, but it is possible that the domestic abuse death rate during COVID will increase in coming months. Staff and support services have been under significant strain for a prolonged period, and in addition, the MOJ funding finishes at the end of March 2021, and it's possible that more resource is going to be needed going forward. In terms of the recommendations from the report, we've identified a number of recommendations, including working with stakeholders to develop a city and county-wide violence against women and girls strategy and action plan with clear success indicators. This has to include a DVA prevention element. We believe we need to continue to work with partners to ensure that our local plans in place to increase take-up services from underrepresented groups. We also know that Nottinghamshire Police needs to take action to improve its identification rate and take-up of domestic violence protection orders, and plans for this are already being put in place. So in summary, despite the challenges which domestic abuse continues to prevent, we think we're in a strong position in terms of our response in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. We've got strong partnership arrangements and excellent services in place. However, there are going to be significant challenges ahead, and we aim to drive forward activity to tackle those in coming months.
Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you. I think we've got a number of questions, so bear with us, and we'll start with Councillor Helen Ann Smith, first of all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to start by saying that I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I can't imagine how long it's taken, so I want to thank everyone that's been involved in it. Ashfield's got one of the highest levels of domestic violence in Nottinghamshire, so I know it is quite a massive problem. We've got a couple of domestic homicide reviews on the plate at the moment. But the only thing I would say is, and it's not necessarily as part of this as such, but around certain times a year where we get the peaks in domestic violence, for example, when England are playing, for example, which they are at the moment with the league, could the Commissioner's Office look at putting some comms through social media, for example, bringing that to the forefront? I know as at the District Council, it's something that I've asked them to do. Whenever the World Cup's on or there's a big sporting event, we put out messages reminding people that there is support there if they need it, because that's when domestic violence tends to increase during major sporting events and Christmas and things like that.
Sorry, I was just checking that I wasn't on mute there. Absolutely, I think that would be a really positive thing to do. I mean, I know that Nottinghamshire Police already put things through their channels, but I think if we work with providers and with Nottinghamshire Police just to look at, as you're saying, when those particular spikes are expected in terms of incidents, and as you say, kind of marry up some kind of comms from our social media channels, etc., so that we're just kind of pushing those opportunities for where people can access support, where they can access help. I think that's definitely something that we could do.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Sorry, Emma, had you finished? And thank you. I've got Councillor Ellis and Mr. Vaughan Newton. Councillor Ellis first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see this report, and thank Emma and the Commissioner and the Commissioner's Office for the hard work that's gone into this. It seems to me a comprehensive survey of the issue, both nationally and locally. And I have read it. It's a hard read and it's a difficult read in many ways. Just want to go back to the panel's view in the past. We've been concerned for a long while with the prevalence of domestic abuse. We've been getting regular updates from the Commission on performance indicators, which consistently show an increase in the levels of reported domestic abuse, usually with a comment that that's a good thing. We've seen more of it. What we wanted to be sure is that that was the case, that more domestic abuse, domestic violence is being reported and identified, but not an increasing number. And similarly, when we've had, as Emma mentioned, during the lockdown, we were told the rates of domestic violence was fairly consistent, reported of domestic violence, but the helplines were reporting lots of increase in calls. I think we've been concerned to try and square these circles. Looking through the report, the crime survey for England and Wales, if I read it right, seems to be saying that domestic abuse has been steady over the last 3 years, but there's been a reduction since 2004, 2005, except of course we know there's data missing on coercive control and honour-based violence. The report also says that recorded incidents have risen by 45% since 2016-17, and this experimental identification rate has increased from 17.4% to 37%, to basically double. I'm not quite sure what that means, so it'd be helpful to have some explanation of that. The report also talked about the improvement in recording, saying that more domestic violence is being recognised and we're catching a lower severity. And there's been a marginal increase in the confidence of victims to report. So I think that really leads me to three questions. Is the Commissioner confident that levels of domestic abuse is stable and that the increases are better recording and better reporting? And the second one, a third of the victims are men, and while I recognise it's predominant issue for women and girls, and just is there a risk that calling a strategy violence against women and girls will neglect men, or will they feel left out? And final point, it's a consultation draft, but can I ask what the plans are for consultation? Is it got to the public? And what the timelines are for that? Thank you.
Thanks for that, David. So a couple of points which I think it's worth making, and then I'm not sure if Paddy or Craig would like to come in alongside it as well. With regards to the levels of DV that are being recorded, as you've said, is the identification rate in terms of the number of DVA crimes and incidents is compared to that of the crime survey's prevalence rates. The crime survey's prevalence rates have basically been quite steady, whilst we've seen incidents rising, which indicates that we're actually capturing more of those incidents in terms of the reporting that's coming into the police. With regards to the violence against women and girls strategy, you'll notice that in terms of the action points, there's actually a separate action point with regards to accessing, underrepresented groups accessing services, which includes male survivors of domestic abuse. The violence against women and girls strategy is something which is actually going to be required by the domestic abuse bill anyway, so is a long-term requirement which we're going to be required to do within the city and county, And then finally, just with regards to the consultation draft, absolutely, it will be out to consultation with the public. There are a number of meetings going forward with regards to the county and to the city where there'll be the opportunity to feed in, but also it will be on our website. There'll be an opportunity for people to feed in on basically their views.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Ellis, was there anything you wanted clarifying around your question, or are you content?
Emma was saying that maybe the Commissioner or Craig might want to come back on the prevalence issue, which is for the panel. It's been the nub of our concern. You know, this is both the Commissioner and the Chief Constable content or satisfied that we are seeing more of as the same size iceberg as opposed to the iceberg getting bigger.
Thank you. Can we perhaps ask the Commissioner and Chief Constable to just make a note of that and gather up the other comments that might include some of what you've already raised? Thank you very much. I've got Mr. Vaughan Newton next, and then I have Councillor Edwards and then Councillor Inglis. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to endorse what our Chair said in her introductory comments on this particular part of today's agenda. It's a brilliant piece of work. I've read it. As David Ellis said, it's a hard read, a very hard read, but it's been quite clearly very well researched, and I think I can see the footsteps of Nicola Wade in a lot of this. I think she's done a good job on it. Mentioned in the main paper, the consultation paper, of work ongoing in the city to improve access to sanctuary. 17 sanctuaries were installed in the city in the 3 months following the lockdown, compared with 11 in all of 2019. That's brilliant. That's a way of mitigating pressure on refuge. It's a way of reducing homelessness, of allowing survivors and their children, if there are resident children, to remain in the family home. I'm a big fan of sanctuary. I was, during my service in Nottinghamshire Police, I was intimately involved with the design of sanctuaries in Broxtowe, Gedling and Rushcliffe areas. Mention in the city, fantastic. Is it happening in the county area? And if not, why not? And is this something that could be embraced as part of a force-wide initiative?
Thanks for that. Sorry, it's just coming off mute. As you said, the sanctuaries that have been made available in the city are due to some increased funding, which we were able to make available. It is something that we are planning on rolling out to the county, and so that's going to be going ahead in due course, because we share your commitment to it, that it's a really positive development, and we wouldn't want to limit it as much as we could.
Thank you. Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you. Councillor Edwards is next. Thank you.
Referring to point 15 of the executive summary, does it appear that we do need more refugees in Nottingham, and if so, how quickly?
Thanks for that. My understanding from the data that was made available is that there is a requirement in terms of more refuge, and that this is something which is tied in with the domestic abuse bill with regards to the requirement for refuge provision. Sorry, I don't think what's 100% clear at the moment is the exact figures in terms of what we are going to be expected to provide. But perhaps that's something that Jane might be able to elaborate on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Councillor Edwards is quite right. We will need more refuge space opening up in the next couple of years. It's likely that the domestic violence bill will ask us to have another. We've currently got 31 spaces in the city, and it's likely that we'll be asked to have another 10. We commissioned 31, but we've actually got 37 currently funded through national government funding. And we've been lucky enough to receive Homes England funding to purchase 12 move-on accommodation, trying to echo what colleagues have done in the county. So we're hoping that we will either be able to maintain the move-on accommodation going forward, or we will be able to increase the number of refugees. I would just say, though, that as my colleague, the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, mentioned earlier, unless we get, we've estimated in the city that to do everything that's outlined in the new statutory duty, we'll need an extra £1 million of DV money. And I can't imagine we will have all of that. So as my colleague stated, we will be making some hard decisions in terms of what we will be prioritising. And the things in the statutory duty range from additional refuge spaces, children's workers, additional workers for adults, therapeutic support to survivors, and a range of other things. So we are very lucky in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, and the fact that colleagues here are so supportive shows that, but we will need more money if we're going to do what they ask us to do in the bill.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Edwards, is there anything you want to come back on, or are you content?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Inglis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to endorse what other people have commented on this document. I mean, anything that addresses domestic violence needs to be welcomed. It is a comprehensive document, and I didn't think it was too hard to read myself, having some background in it as well. But the only thing that Councillor Ellis mentioned, it does seem heavily weighted for women rather than males. There is 30% of males that are victims. You look nationally. I mean, the other week there was the National Rail thing for women to escape on free rail travel. No point did it include males. I've researched male refugees. The data I can only find was there's only 9 in the country. Is it a stigma or embarrassment that the guys aren't coming forward? I mean, personally, I know of 2 that are suffering some serious domestic abuse, and they're not taking it forward. They've confided in me, but I think they will welcome some support. But when you go on the national helpline, the opening page is orientated towards women. It's all women's stories. There's women there to speak to. You look onto the male side of it, and the header is still for women and children against domestic violence on the male page. And the men have just got 2 paragraphs on that. So I really think that balance needs to sway back a little bit and make it more available and presentable for males to come forward.
Thank you for your comments. I think, as you're saying, and as is recognised in the report, men are underrepresented in terms of those who are accessing support. We do actually commission a male service through Equation. I don't know whether Anna wants to say anything about the support that is currently provided.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to say a few words in response to that. I think our understanding of men's experience of domestic abuse is far lower than our experience of women. But I do think we need to understand and continue to recognise that it is a gendered crime. So women are more likely to experience domestic abuse. I think we're very lucky in that we have a men's service locally. We're a small service and we're relatively new. So we've been running for the last 8 years. But we're learning a lot, Rob, in terms of what men want, in terms of what they need, and in terms of what we can provide. In terms of your refuge comment, in terms of men only having 9 refuges across the country, we find that our male service users are far less likely to want to go into refuge. They have greater access to finances of their own, and they generally have other options. So I think in the last year, we've placed 1 man in refuge. So the demand isn't quite as high, or our understanding currently of men's need is that they don't need refuge in the same way that women do. In terms of not coming forward, we've been doing a lot of work, and that is obviously supported by our commissioners, but in terms of understanding the male survivors that are accessing our service, and as a result of consulting with our survivors across the city and county, we launched the Support Not Silence campaign last year. So that was our first male-specific campaign to raise awareness of men's experience of domestic abuse. So we do need to still recognise that this is predominantly a gendered crime, with women experiencing far more severe and prolonged domestic abuse, but men absolutely experience it. They need the support, and we need to be raising awareness. And I think that is being supported across the city and county.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're content with that, Councillor?
No, that explains it nicely. And, there is work going on to address that problem.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'm mindful that we want to invite the Commissioner and/or the Chief Constable to comment on the issues raised by Councillor Ellis, but I've just seen another hand go up, and I'm sorry I can't see. Oh, is it Councillor Scott?
It's Mary. No, it's Mary
Sorry.
Abrams.
Thank you, Mary Abrams. I couldn't just see, my screen was obscuring you.
Yeah,
can we take your question, and then we can hand over to the Commissioner and the Chief Constable?
Yeah, it was regarding the fact that the levels of domestic abuse are rising, but the levels of prosecution and conviction is falling, only 8.4%. And it talks about the concern about increasing focus on evidence-led prosecution. So it's just this concern. Is there anything that can be done with regard to increasing prosecution rates, which may then lead to deterrence or getting stories out there that would help in the long term to reduce the level of domestic violence?
Sorry, just coming off mute. I think there's a couple of things that we need to recognise. One is, as is mentioned in the report, survivors don't necessarily always support taking things down a criminal justice route. So even though an issue might have been identified, it isn't necessarily one in which they want resolved in the criminal justice system. And I think that's something that we do need to recognise and to understand. At the same time, I think it's important that we make sure that the criminal justice process and all of its kind of facets are available, and are options that are available to those survivors who want to go down that particular route. So evidence-led prosecutions is one of those which you mentioned. Also coming in with the domestic abuse bill or other options which will be available, such as the DVPOs. And I think we need to make sure that they're accessed properly as well. And again, that's something which Craig might like to talk about, given that there's some work which is currently going on within the PPU with regards to those.
Thank you very much, Emma. Before inviting them in, I've got Councillor Helen Ann Smith wants to come back in, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Just come on to Mayor Abraham's point, and it's a very valid one. The number of prosecutions is very low to the number of incidents. But about a year ago, I got appointed as the council's domestic violence coordinator from the members' side, and through the Commissioner's office, we also managed to get a domestic violence coordinator as a member of staff. And one thing that we found, we had one lady, it was a lady in this instance, who'd been abused 6 times previously and never wanted to take it to court. But through the work through the domestic violence coordinator member of staff and our complex case team, she actually felt more confident in being able to take that prosecution forward. So if you don't have a position like that within your authority, I really do suggest that you work with Paddy's office and you do get one of those members of staff, because it has made a massive impact in Ashfield.
Thank you very much. Mayor Abrams, did you want to make any comment in that response?
No, that was a useful contribution, and yeah, I'd be interested to see what Craig's got to say about it, and Paddy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If I can ask the Commissioner and the Chief Constable, first of all, I'd like them to address the issue that was raised by Councillor Ellis, and then any other comments the Commissioner or the Chief Constable might want to make. And then I'd like to just invite our guests, the providers of services, to see if there's anything else they'd like the panel to be informed about. So can I call on the Commissioner first, or the Chief Constable, whoever's going to take on that comment that was raised by Councillor Ellis? Thank you.
So let me start, if Craig is content with that. The work locally and indeed nationally suggests that reporting is increasing, and I think it is the case that women in particular now have more confidence in the criminal justice system. So I'm pretty reassured, having looked at the work and the research around this. I think picking up your point, Christine, about talking to some of the providers, I think it will be really interested for Yasmin to talk a little bit about the helpline, and for all the providers to talk about the point that Councillor Smith just made around support. And that's a really big issue. Sticking with women through a long period of time really is important. And I think Craig would be better versed to answer the question around evidence-led prosecutions. He'll talk with you about how we can go forward when survivors aren't prepared to offer up evidence, and he'll talk about the work that he's been doing, or the force have been doing, with individual officers, ensuring that at the point of entry, at the point of involvement, that evidence is gathered. So if you're happy, Christine, I'll just pass over to Craig at that point.
Thank you very much. Can I welcome the Chief Constable?
Good afternoon, everyone. Just addressing those points as you asked previously, Christine. So, David, I think the iceberg, yes, we're definitely seeing more. The recording categories we've improved at recognising initially, and that touches on what Paddy said. I do personally think that the numbers are increasing, and I think there's more confidence in the system. I would welcome that, definitely. I don't see the 30% men, if I'm perfectly honest. I see it as more of a sort of 80-20 at most, but a 90-10 from my operational policing experience and from reading lots of the incident logs. And in terms of the DVPOs, a good preventative measure, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the funding for that falls entirely on the police. And we need to keep making sure that the CPS don't shy away from their charging responsibilities. It's not a cheap option to try and avoid charging when somebody needs charging. The other aspect of victimless prosecutions, really chuffed around this, because what we have been able to do with the body-worn video is to really capture that first point of evidence. And even if the victim isn't supporting the prosecution, we use the body worn and we can use the 999 tape. In addition to that, we can use previous incidents and reports from neighbours. But we are still, to be perfectly candid, and I'm sure providers will endorse this, we are still up against a high threshold for the CPS to consider charging. And in and amongst all this, I think that's going to be one of our significant challenges going forward, particularly with the backlogs caused by COVID. So that's my sort of note of caution. And I think really the report is good. I think it goes into some depth. I think if I may, the PCC's office has probably undersold itself. Certainly looking at point 16 on page 8, an IOM, there is a bid in for another £400,000. This national bid has been secured for the additional support for that helpline. And certainly compared to lots of places I've worked, the level of commitment from that particular office is very high in my professional opinion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ellis, you started the ball rolling. Did you want to come back on anything from the Chief Constable?
No, I'm happy to be reassured from Craig's professional standpoint that he's happy that, as I said, we see more of the iceberg and not that the iceberg getting bigger. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, did you want to come back in or and make any other comments before inviting your provider organisations to make any comments that you've already highlighted to us?
No, I'd be very keen that the panel hears from the people who are doing the real work. So could we pass over to them?
Yes, indeed. And I think you asked Yasmin to speak first, didn't you?
Yes, that's right, Christine.
Yeah. Can you hear us, Yasmin?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much for the invite and for inviting us to be part of this. I'd like to first of all pay tribute to everyone in Nottinghamshire because compared to other areas I've worked, it's just brilliant to come to an area that's got such a well-established ecosystem and such committed local authorities and PCC. In terms of the helpline, the report quotes that there were 11,233 calls to the helpline in 2019 to 20. We are already seeing an exponential rise in demand for our services. Calls to the helpline have gone up incredibly. 1 week we recorded a 224% increase on the same period last year. I think COVID is going to present us in terms of domestic violence with a picture that we just will not have a comparison from previous years. In terms of the calls to the helpline, survivors threatening suicide is now a regular pattern. The impact on survivors' mental health, both adults and children, during the whole period of the lockdown and the restrictions on movement, I think we're going to be seeing a rise in demand, not just in domestic abuse services, but also for mental health services. We've talked about the criminal justice system, but I think we need to remember the civil justice system and the ways in which child contact is used, so that what we often see are, I guess, tactical complaints from fathers usually, but also from in very smaller numbers from women too, around child contact, and it's difficult for organisations to sometimes to unpick what is actually happening within those families. We've also seen child contact where children have been removed from the parent who has guardianship of the child, and children not being returned to the place where they usually live by the parent who's estranged from the family. I think going forward, it's a really complicated picture. I think the demands on services are going to be incredibly hard. The financial envelope is going to be what it is, but I'm absolutely confident that the commitment in this area from all of us across all sectors will help us respond as positively as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. And I think, Commissioner, you wanted one of your other providers to perhaps give an update to the panel.
It would be helpful if Mandy gave a view from the county side.
Yes, thank you. Well, welcome, Mandy. Hope you can hear us.
Yes, I can. Thank you. It's obviously, I echo everything what Yasmin said and what everybody's been talking about. It is going to be very strange times moving forward, because we don't really know the ultimate outcome of the impact COVID is going to have on us recovering and moving forward. What we know from what we've been seeing in services at the moment is that we've seen increases. We've seen increases in the contact with our organisation, and increases in women and children actually wanting to access support. So we've been trying to manage this in line with government guidance around COVID-19, but also about trying to safeguard. So we've been trying to provide quite a range of different mechanisms to be able to speak to survivors. Some of those survivors will be living in households where perpetrator is resident, so that's been really, really difficult for our staff to be able to respond to in a safe way. And some of those perpetrators have been going to work, and we've been able to support around safe contact times. And some women have been living in households on their own, and some of the issues have been around stalking or child contact issues, or family members, other family members getting involved. So it has been very challenging. Our refugees have had to find ways to safely bring women into refuge. We're lucky in North Nottinghamshire that we've got 2 refuges. One's a self-contained unit with flats, and one is a communal refuge. So we've had to work across both of those refuges to transition women into the actual refuge environment without putting anybody else at risk due to COVID, because it's shared facilities in our Mansfield refuge. So it's really important that we don't put anybody at risk by bringing a woman in, but we don't want a woman not to have access to refuge provision. So we've been quite lucky that we've been able to manage this between our 2 refuges, and our refuge workers have been on site from day one. They never pulled out of any support. They've been in the refuge providing face-to-face, because we felt it was really important, if somebody has made that decision to leave that relationship and come into a refuge in a place that they know nobody, in an area sometimes that they do not know of, it was important that they had a welcoming response, safe face, somebody that they could talk to, and that wasn't actually virtually or via telephone. And I think the feedback that I've had from the women that's been through our refuges during COVID has been very positive. I think they've really appreciated that and welcomed it. In terms of some of our community services, our service that we call our DASWA service, so it's domestic abuse support workers, they have seen a high increase in demand of their services. We have to have at least 2 people on duty each day to cope with the volume of calls that are coming through. Now, some of that is about women that are already being supported by us, and some of those calls are about women that are thinking about leaving a relationship, or have left a relationship, or don't know what to do next. So most of those responses have been quite time, restraints on dealing with them, which has made it really quite difficult if we're getting quite a few calls coming through, because there's only so many lines that can come into our building at any one time. We have provided different levels of support. So some of those women will have support through Zoom, through Teams, or through telephone. We are just at the moment starting to transition some of our workers back into our FAR centre, which is our women's centre. But again, we've got to do this in a way that ensures everybody can social distance. So we're trying to work around most of these issues at the moment. For children and young people, we have high volumes of children and young people that were either partway through support or waiting to pick up some group work. What we've done is we've been in contact with everybody where it's safe to do so, and we have set up being able to support through Zoom or Teams, and that is obviously age dependent. And that has been working fairly well for the ones that have wanted to access it. We've had worksheets and pieces of work that we're going to be doing with them posted out each week to that child or that young person, so that they know what the session of support is going to look like. And again, feedback of the ones, it's not appropriate for everybody. For the younger ones, it's not necessarily been the best approach, but for the older ones, it has worked fairly well. We've seen higher numbers linked to stalking, and we've been dealing with some very nasty stalking situations and stalking cases that we've carried on providing support with. And our IDFA services we saw a little bit right at the beginning of COVID, what looked like a little bit of a drop in cases coming through to Marek, but very quickly spun around and shot up, and have gone back up to averaging around 25 cases per Marek on the north. That could be more in the city in the south. Our staff are still working, the majority of them are still working from home. Due to the increased volume of survivors that's wanted support, luckily, because they're not travelling around the county providing that support face to face, they have been able to support more survivors through telephone and Zoom and Teams. Now, we have got quite high numbers, but we've also got high numbers of waiting lists as well. So for some of our group programmes like Freedom Programme, we've got 217 women now that are waiting for Freedom Programme. We are working at the moment to devise something that we can deliver virtually, and to try it. But again, this will depend on where the woman lives, who she lives with, if she's got the technology to be able to do this, if the perpetrator lives in the home or doesn't live in the home. So there's lots of things that we've got to take into consideration to make sure whatever we do is safe for the survivor and for the children. And we're hoping to try, now schools are back, to look at what those links might be like with school. But we've got some very embedded and well-developed partnerships with the police, with probation, with social care. We have got some good relationships with Mansfield Magistrates Court. So there are means of being able to work with those agencies that may be providing that face-to-face for us to be able to engage more. But it's quite a worrying and nervous time, because the numbers are still rising and we've got high volumes we're supporting, and our waiting lists are increasing. And I've done some work which may or may not be accurate, but to look at predictions of how long it may take us as an organisation to recover from COVID. And I think realistically it's going to take us best part of a year for some of those group programmes to fully catch up and deliver. And that doesn't take into account what might happen next. So we don't know what's going to happen. Now the children are back at school. We don't know if there's going to be this second wave. We don't know if there's going to be localised waves. So it's all a bit of a nervous time, but everybody is doing everything they can possibly do to ensure the support's in place. We've got video links into court for family court and for cases that's being heard, so that we can either act as a Mackenzie friend, or we can go feedback to the survivor. We're trying to make it that as much as what we normally do happens, so the survivor at the heart of it gets what they need to be able to help them in their journey and their recovery, where it can be a recovery.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you. You've given us an extremely pictorial vision of the challenges that you all face in this very, very difficult field, and thank you very much for that. Before moving back to the Commissioner, can I just check if you or any of your colleagues have any other comment they would like to make? I think you've given the panel a very good feel for all the challenges that all of us involved in public sector services have a duty to listen to very seriously.
Could I just add a point, if that's possible?
Is that you, Anna? Did you?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fire away.
Again, I wanted to just echo how great the report is and how collaborative and strong the sector is. We are incredibly lucky in Nottinghamshire. And what sets us apart is that consistent strategic support to this whole systems approach. And for us as an organisation, one of the key things is that focus on prevention for equation as an organisation. So that campaigning, that training, the survivor resources, all of that has been crucial over the last decade, but particularly over the last 6 months. I think just to echo what Helen had said about comms during peak time of the year, we are commissioned to provide cause awareness throughout the year. We provide information and messaging around particular days and around peak times. So some of that work is already ongoing, and I can link people in if they want to know kind of how to echo or amplify those messages during those peak times. One of the benefits, or if there is a silver lining to COVID for us as an organisation, is being able to pull together a comms strategy, so a COVID domestic abuse comms strategy with the police, with the Police and Crime Commissioner, with public health across the city and county, which has meant that during COVID, all of our messaging around domestic abuse to survivors and to professionals has been consistent and really strong. We have been able to get rid of some of the myths that have been going out during this time over the last 6 months. And I hope that is something that remains, but it's been really good to break down some of those barriers during COVID to joining up and being really consistent. I think the other thing for me, just to really quickly mention, is that support in getting into schools and putting our universal education into place. That consists, the last 15 years we've been able to be going into primary and secondary schools, working with year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8 and year 9, building up that healthy relationships education. And for me, as we come out of COVID, or as the restrictions lift, that support over the last 15 years will make it so much easier for our young people to speak out, because we're already there, we're already in schools, we're already supporting teachers, so that our young people returning to school, they're going to need to speak out. And I think that support over the decades in making sure that we have that universal provision in, and we have that training for teachers will be really critical as the next 18 months plays out.
Thank you very much, Anna, for that positive comment. It's a good note just to pause, I think, and just ask the Commissioner if there's anything he wishes to add before I put forward the recommendation to the panel.
Christine, the panel has always taken a very real interest in it. It's reflected in the discussion we've had over the last hour. As we've said, the report is draft. If panel members have got further comments, we're more than happy to look at them and try and take them on board. But I guess the closing date for further comments perhaps would be middle of November, give people a couple of months to work on this. But I'm grateful for the discussion, and sometimes we don't say thank you enough. So could I just say thanks to Yasmin, Anna and Mandy and their staff for all their work over what's been a really difficult period.
Thank you, Commissioner. Again, to echo your comments, I'd like to thank our visitors for coming, and please feel free to leave at this point if you wish. You're welcome to stay and hear the rest of the debate. Before just putting the recommendation to colleagues, I also want to thank everyone that's been involved, and it's easy to forget the people behind the scenes. So I would just like to thank through your Chief Executive, Kevin Dennis to thank, it was Kevin who first arranged the roundtable discussion way back in, I don't know if it was January or February, and also to Nicola Wade, who clearly has had a tremendous job in pulling this together and putting it into good administrative order. And it's often we forget the people behind the scenes who work tirelessly. So I'd be grateful if you'd pass on those thanks, Commissioner. Can I just check? Sorry, can I just check if there's any colleague wishes to make any final comment before I put the recommendations? No? Then can the recommendation be agreed, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. Any abstentions at all or any votes against? In that case, can I thank everyone? And I think we're planning, Commissioner, to have an update next March, which we live in hope that it can be held where we can all see one another properly and not through the video link. And Commissioner, if it's at all possible, I think we've touched on this quite a bit during listening to the debate this afternoon. What we're missing is perhaps some commentary from the CPS and the court service. And clearly, I appreciate that's a difficult area, but maybe when we come to have an update, you might have some time to think about how we could perhaps hear from their comments as well.
So I'd be very happy to do that. Immediately after this call, Emma, my colleague, is talking around the wider criminal justice system. One of the real anxieties post-COVID is the difficulties that the courts and CPS face at the moment. I'm not sure, Christine, whether it's been announced yet. It's imminent if it's not been announced. The government are just about this afternoon to announce a package of measures to try and resolve the difficulties in the court system.
Thank you very much for that information. Thank you. And thank you to all our guests. If people are content, then now can we move to item number 5 on the agenda, the work programme, which are pages 37 to 42. Before handing over to Keith Ford to introduce this item, I would just like to formally move the recommendation, which the Vice Chair will second.
Yeah, formally second, reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just to say to members, this is the usual work programme. It's been updated in consultation with the Chief Executive of the Commissioner's Office. So you'll see that the items that we'll have scheduled for the next meeting in November, and that includes, hopefully we will have the findings of part 1 of the Home Office review into the role of Police and Crime Commissioners by that point. As well as that, the report also mentions the fact that at this stage it is still hoped that the Frontline National Police and Crime Panel Conference will still go ahead in November. So we've currently got 3 members of the panel signed up to attend the conference and 1 of the support workers. And I also understand Councillor Smith is attending from Ashfield District Council as well. So as well as our 3 panel members, we've also got a regular substitute member signed up as well. So at this stage, it is still hope it will go ahead, and I will keep members posted if it looks like it's not going to be possible. At the moment, they've reduced numbers so that it can still happen, albeit with social distancing in place. It's normally a very popular event, as anybody who's been to the conference previously will be able to say. So it's over to members if you've got any questions at all, or if you've got any suggestions on other issues to include within the work programme, would gladly welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Are there any questions or suggestions for inclusion in the work programme from any members? Thank you. In that case, can I propose the recommendation be agreed? Thank you. Any votes against or any abstentions? No, thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much, Keith. That takes us to item 6, the Police and Crime Commissioner's update report to June 2020. I think that should say perhaps a little bit later, but maybe that's just something. It is up to June. Yeah, thank you. I lose track of time with these Zoom and various things. They're pages 43 to 102, and there are 4 appendices attached to the report. Commissioner, can I hand over to you to take us through this report.
Well, Christine, you've made the introduction. This is a very long report, over around 60 pages, and I just want to draw out, there's three themes really. First of all, the easy bit, which is at the end, which is some figures on the out-term budget for the last financial year. As we've been predicting throughout the year, there's been a slight overspend, an overspend of £92,000 on a budget of over £200 million. The overspend is slightly less than we've been telling the panel earlier on because of COVID restrictions and non-delivery of items. So that's where we are on the budget. Eagle-eyed members of the panel, and I know you all eagle-eyed members of the panel, will see that the two big capital schemes, the replacement of the Bridewell and the new joint fire and police headquarters, are broadly on track. They're making really good progress, and I'm delighted with what the contractors have been able to do, again, in quite a difficult circumstance. And that was the second point I wanted to make, which is around the effects of COVID on the police. Today, or certainly in June, we were indicating that crime was down 22% compared with the same figure of last year. I know the Chief Constable will want to comment on this, and I hope you, Christine, talk to him directly around this. But crime during the peak of the pandemic went down significantly, both here in Nottinghamshire and nationally. We're now coming out of the pandemic, and crime levels are more or less back to where they were before. One or two have commented during the discussion that there are areas where we've seen an increase in domestic violence, both nationally and here locally, but not quite as significant as people thought. I think Mandy, when she was talking with you earlier on, talked about stalking, and we have got extra resources. One of the few forces that have got resources dedicated to stalking. And there's some traditional crime types that are still down, but are rising again with people at home. Burglary has been down, and of course shoplifting has been down as well, but things are beginning to increase. You'd have seen from the report that 999 calls were down, but calls of antisocial behaviour have been up very significantly, nearly up 100%. That doesn't mean that there's been an increase in antisocial behaviour, and again, Craig may want to comment on that, but there have been a lot of calls into the control room around people not following the guidelines around protecting themselves and others during the pandemic. So that's broadly where we're at on crime. I wanted to make a final point about working with the BAME communities. During this period, we've seen the death not only of George Floyd, but of other people in the United States. We've had demonstrations here in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire and across the country. There was a big demonstration on the Forest. I think it was quite interesting that when they were taking evidence from the community at the Home Affairs Select Committee, that the demonstration at the Forest, and more particularly the policing of it, was highlighted as being an exemplar, and there was close working relationships with the police and the organisers, and that's continued since then. And one of the things, Christine, that has struck me about the Black Lives Matter campaign has been the amount of young people involved. People on the demonstrations and subsequently predominantly young people. and there's a group of new emerging, will be leaders one day within the black community, of people who want to take this forward. I think this is an opportunity for change. I think it gives us the same opportunity for change as after the Macpherson inquiry. I'm quite involved nationally in discussions on the way forward, and jointly the College of Policing, the Chiefs Council and the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners will be publishing a set of proposals, a timetable on the way forward fairly soon. But here in Nottinghamshire, without being complacent, I think we're in a relatively good place. We've always seen working with BAME communities as a priority. The panel will remember the very early work that was commissioned looking at the Black and Asian communities' perceptions of the police, very early when I came into office. We've continued to make really good progress. The number of stop and searches nationally is up, and it's up here significantly in Nottinghamshire as a result of the desire to tackle violence, and in particular knife crime. On knife crime, we're still bucking the trend, 14% down in Nottinghamshire, a higher figure in the city of Nottinghamshire compared with rises in the East Midlands and elsewhere. And the important thing is that the stop and search is being intelligence-led, and almost 40% of stop and searches lead to some kind of positive outcome, which is probably double the national average. And of course, we have a stop and search scrutiny committee, and we make good use, and Craig may want to comment on this, around body-worn video. We're also recruiting very heavily at the moment. Last financial year, we recruited 147 officers. We're still working on the figures this year. We haven't had final confirmation from funding from the Home Office, but our expectation, our hope, is to recruit an extra 150 officers. Those are new and on top of officers. Those aren't replacement officers. Officers are coming in cohorts, and in broad terms, 20 to 25% of all new cohorts are composed of people from a BAME community. And that's a very impressive figure compared with the rest of the country. And the force has been recognised nationally as a leader in this area. And our aspiration, although it's going to be really quite difficult, is to ensure that our workforce reflects the wider population. The figure in the workforce at the moment has just gone over the halfway mark. Nearly 7% of our officers are from BAME backgrounds. The panel will recall that 11% of the population in Nottinghamshire are from a BAME background. We aspire to be the first force, and I think we will achieve it within the next 2 to 3 years, to have a workforce that reflects the wider community. And we need to bear in mind the forthcoming census, which will change the figures slightly. There's also some indication in my report about the need to refresh the way that we work with the Black and Asian community, and we're in really deep discussions with the community at the moment about how best to do that. We've just set up what's called a community listening group. It's had its first meeting. Second meeting is planned in a couple of weeks' time. And on top of that, we're going to set up an independent panel to advise the police, particularly around issues like the use of handcuffs, tasers, use of force, and the way that custody operates. So, Christine, I've skirted through quite a long report. I'll stop at that point. Sure, you want to let Craig say a word or two about COVID and post-COVID recovery, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that the panel have got.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And before handing over to the Chief Constable, I've got Councillor Ellis with his hand indicating he'd like to ask a question. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the Commissioner for the report. I particularly appreciate that the Commissioner report puts forward the BAME case study. I mean, I think it should, in the context of the relationship between police and crime panels and the Commissioner, it shows that the Commissioner's on the front foot here. He's anticipated what we would have wanted to see, so we didn't have to ask him to produce something on this. He's done it, and I think the report highlights that trends are going in the right direction. It's always important that the communities have confidence in the police and policing. I mean, as I understand it, policing's been built on support from citizens, and in the past there was an expectation that the public would step in and help police officers. It seems now with citizen journalists, it's more likely that people will film what police officers are doing than actually getting and help them. I've got a couple of quick questions. The annual report highlights there's been a reduction in hate crime. There's no mention of hate crime in this case study. I just wonder, is there any recent data on racially aggravated crime which shows the trend in that? And then second one, picking up the Commissioner's comments on stop and search being intelligence-led, which obviously we would all agree with. I'm just not sure, it might be a question for the Chief Constable, when does intelligence-led stop and search become racial profiling? Thank you.
So let me answer both those questions directly, Dave. We've got loads of information about hate crime. I'll produce for the panel a graph that operates over a period of years that shows that hate crime peaks when events are occurring nationally and internationally. So around Brexit, for example, we saw hate crime increase. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, with the election of a new president of the United States, hate crime arose. If there's a terrorist activity, you see a rise in hate crime. And during the pandemic, we've seen a rise in hate crime, and perhaps that's not surprising. The numbers affecting the Chinese communities have increased, but they are relatively small numbers, but big percentage increases. And although hate crime generally is level, hate crime, race hate crime and religious hate crime, particularly Muslim hate crime, has increased. But we can get the figures out for you. In terms of racial profiling, I'm very confident. I'm very committed around this issue. I know there's been some discussion individually with panel members about the fixed penalty notices around COVID. The numbers here in Nottinghamshire are amongst the smallest in the community. I think we're the 8th lowest force in issuing penalty notices. And David, you will know, and other panel members will know, there's been an awful lot of speculation and debate around this. I think it is quite clear nationally that disproportionality has occurred. The numbers are so small in Nottinghamshire that it's hard to make a comment, a careful comment around that, although we have had quite a lot of discussion, Chief Constable, myself and colleagues around this point. And I think when Craig gets an opportunity to talk, he might talk with you about his view on not only people recording and putting online their own recordings off the phone, but making body-worn video evidence that the police have got available more widely than it is now. It is available to the scrutiny panel, but certainly some of the incidents that have occurred might be viewed differently if the police's own video were available and shown.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I've got Councillor Carlton first, then Councillor McCree, and then Mayor Abrahams, in that order. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Commissioner. I hope you can hear me okay. I would just like to ask a question in relation to page 44, paragraph 3.3, in terms of protecting vulnerable people from harm. I note in the report it highlights the 16% reduction in missing persons over the last year. I'm just wondering if you put that into some form of context for the panel. Is that sort of more of a preventative approach been taken by the team, or is there sort of other factors in play? And secondly to that, sort of further down in the report, it highlights the increasing missing with no apparent risk with the figures there. I was just wondering if you could show that there's any correlation in how missing persons are being reported. Thank you.
Scott, I think it might be better if Craig commented in detail on this, because it's one of the innovations that he's brought in and has put a lot of time and effort into it. And you'll see from the report there have been financial savings. The force has got one of the few forces in the country that's got a dedicated missing persons team. It focuses on identifying people, particularly young people at risk, and trying to intervene early on to try and resolve the underlying pattern of behaviour and the difficulties that cause this. But if you're content, I'll leave the major response to Craig on this.
Thank you. Can we maybe just pick up other comments before asking the Chief Constable to come in, Commissioner, if that's okay? I've got several people waiting to ask questions. So I've got Councillor McRae, Mayor Abrahams, Councillor Edwards and Councillor Eaton. So if we could start please with Councillor McRae.
Hi there, and good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I just wanted, if Paddy could pass on our thanks firstly to the Inspector Riley and the Broxtowe team, because they've done a cracking job. So obviously, you know, I always like to start off on a thank you. So if you can pass that on, that'd be appreciated. There's been a significant increase in antisocial behaviour during the lockdown, over 7,000 cases during March to June. Is this purely down to referrals about people breaking lockdown restrictions, or is the issue is wider than that? Thank you.
Well, Richard, thanks for your comments for Simon Riley. I've seen correspondence that you've had with him and his reply to you around drugs in Stapleford just this morning, and you'll know the work that he's got in hand that he's keen to talk with you about to try and resolve that. So I'm grateful for your comments. On antisocial behaviour, the vast majority, in fact almost exclusively, the number of new reports have been about people complaining about disregard to COVID restrictions. There's been quite a lot of debate nationally with the government around, and the Home Office in particular, about the involvement of the police in enforcement action. We need to remember that a lot of the guidelines are just that. They're the guidelines, it's not the law. And I think there's been quite a lot of misunderstanding around this, and some messages nationally that's not been as helpful as it might have been.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Abrahams, thank you for waiting.
Mine's also 3.3. but it's about it's talking about proactive police and partnerships activity in response to modern slavery in county lines has also led to referral rates of more than doubling to 149% over the last year. So I was thinking over the last year, if you think that during the COVID period, I think there was a big drop in the activity around the county lines because it was more easier to identify people moving around with this activity. So my first question is that 149% probably an underestimate based on the fact that for a large period of that year it wasn't easy for them to do that? And did we learn anything that's going to help us to reduce that county line drug activity, you know, because obviously that was one of the major concerns, especially in Mansfield, well, all over the country. But you know, drugs that were coming into the area from county lines was a major cause for concern, and how to address that, you know, is we're always looking for some encouragement that we're getting on top of that.
So I think you're right, Andy, to mention the issue of county lines. It's a top priority for the government at the moment. I think we need to reflect that it's not a new phenomenon. It's an old phenomenon which has been badged up under a new name. I think the reality is in Nottinghamshire, we tend to be an exporter of county lines rather than an importer, although there is some evidence to suggest that there's been more activity around drug-related county line labelled issues in rural areas. But you're right to raise this as an issue. It's an issue for kind of the landscape of policing, how much can be done locally, what needs to be done at a regional level, what needs to be done at a national level. And I think we'll see a lot of progress and a lot of discussion on this over the next 12 to 24 months.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got Councillor Edwards and then Councillor Eaton. Councillor Edwards, thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Chair. A number of points. Small one first, just to say your fixed penalty notice on COVID's going up by 1 this weekend because of a party in the Meadows. But well done for the police for getting to grips with that one. We are a bit concerned about having seen a period of some success, actually, and no doubt the nature of the public health emergency has meant there's been less activity for people to beg from. But we had a central facility which we paid for, thinking the government were going to finance it, and the government has since backed down on that. But did a lot of good work with people who were living rough and begging on streets, and that is now, you know, as a city centre resident, I can see that coming back. And I know that there's more concern in the Meadows, the area I represent, including head teacher reporting one incident recently of something that was more strident in the way that people were conducting themselves when taking drugs in public. So I'd appreciate feedback on how we think we're dealing with the situation of begging and taking drugs in public. On staffing, it is good news that we're increasing the numbers. I note the emphasis on protecting the front line, and I do always like to make the point that sometimes I think you need a capacity behind the front line to make sure the front line are being kept up to speed in terms of their capabilities and their culture and their ability to tackle problems rather than process them. And I have a slight concern that there's a little bit of that with the police at the moment, of not doing enough about actually sorting a problem as opposed to just reporting it. An example of that would be the frequent references to dealing with problems by saying, well, can there be more cameras, rather than actually doing something more proactive and more effective. I want to make some remarks about the far-right rally that took place in Nottingham recently. I think the police were misled, and the police were very kind to ring me about the arrangements on that rally in the run-up to it, and I think they were misled. But there's clearly a new form of politics evolving, driving on with the idea of conspiracies concerning child protection, conspiracies about the nature of mainstream politics, and bringing it into a new kind of politics that in America they're actually now trying to treat as a kind of domestic terrorism. I'm not really making that point here today. I'm sure the Chief Counsel will have a view on to what extent the situation is developing and does need to be treated as a form of terrorism. But an aspect of this is plainly anti-Semitism, which is being demonstrated on the streets of Nottingham. And I just think there's a sense in which I'd like some feedback on how the Chief and the Commissioner are reflecting on what's happening and what more they think we might need to do. And yes, in terms of national and international incidents, if only following today's developments on national politics, it's plain that what's coming with Brexit is chaos. I think I think you've actually got it in your full plan to consider what it is you're doing about getting ready for Brexit, because it's plain that it's going to be chaotic. Those are my points, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Commissioner,
So,
I've got two more. Sorry, Commissioner, I've got two more. Shall we gather up those comments as well, and then,
okay,
if that's okay?
Sure.
Councillor Eaton first, and then Councillor Smith. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Mine is for Paddy. I've had a long email and letter from local councils. These are all local issues in Bassetlaw regarding Harworth and Burcoats, regarding a rising crime in them areas. And I'd like to invite Paddy, perhaps Inspector Bellamy, to attend a meeting to talk to the local councillors. The second point is I've had some concerns, some questions asked from residents in Worksop Town Centre about how many police officers are actually present in the Worksop Town Centre in the daytime and evenings, in particular at weekends, and especially now the town centre is opening again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we can just gather Councillor Smith's questions, and then Paddy and the Chief can have plenty of opportunity to respond to quite a lot of things that are being raised. Councillor Smith, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If this is the wrong point to say this, then do forgive me, but this is my first meeting that I've attended, so I'll just start, and if I'm in the wrong time, just let me know. I don't know if this is more aimed towards Paddy or Craig, to be fair, but I recently was out with the Roads Policing Unit across Nottinghamshire, and that is a fantastic team of people. I can't fault what they do. They do a fantastic, amazing job. But my question would be, is it in the ether at the moment to put any additional resources into the Road Policing Unit? Because I know if comparing our unit in Nottinghamshire to that in Derbyshire, Derbyshire seems to have considerable more resources within that section than we do in Nottinghamshire. And I think it's something that we're missing. If we was to have more units within that team, this could make much more of an impact. So that would be my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Commissioner and the Chief Constable, I think, are waiting to come back and give some responses. Commissioner, would you lead us through this?
I'll start, but a lot of these are operational matters.
Indeed, I recognise.
I want to comment on. So in terms of drugs in the Meadows, Michael, I know you're in touch with James Walker, the local inspector. I've seen the correspondence on that. I've visited the site myself, which is by the Portland Leisure Centre, and you can be sure that work is in hand around that. In terms of begging, I know that this is an issue that concerns the City Council. Matt Healy, Superintendent Matt Healy, is talking to your colleagues around begging in the City Council. The police are keen to work with the City Council on that. It's a shared responsibility, and I'm sure that Matt will help us find a solution. terms of the march, again, you took a big interest in this, and I was pleased that the commander on the day kept you informed before the march. As you say, there was some disinformation beforehand. I have to say it was a hodgepodge of causes that was reflected on the march. A number of people have said to me, what was the march all about? And I have to say there wasn't a consistent and a coherent message around this. I think significantly no arrests were made, although there were one or two anxious moments during the demonstration. In terms of police numbers, last year we recruited an extra 150 officers, 147 officers. The intention is to recruit 150 this year. In broad terms, 70% of them will be frontline officers, and all parts of the county will have the benefit of what exists in the Bestwood area, or North Nottingham at the moment, and Gedling, of a dedicated, proactive policing team. And I know your local inspector, James Walker, has got really strong ideas of how he might deploy those, and the teams will come into effect from the beginning of October through the autumn. Tony, turning to Bassetlaw, you've been in touch with me about Harworth and Burcoats. Arrangements are being made for me to visit Harworth and Burcoats with Inspector Bellamy, the local inspector. I've had a look at the figures in Harworth and Burcoats. Wherever I go in the county, people tell me that crime is up. I have to say that the figures in Harworth and Burcoats don't reflect the concern that you're hearing from local councillors, but we'll come up and we'll have a discussion with you around that. In terms of policing, number of police officers on duty in any one area, well, I'll ask Craig to answer that directly, but a matter of principle, and for obvious reasons, there's a reluctance to say how many police officers are available in any one spot at any one time. And of course, we have a layered approach to policing. Extra resources come in from across the force, across the region, and nationally, if necessary, if there are major issues and threats. And Helen, you talk about roads policing. It's very much on the agenda at the moment. The Inspectorate, HMIC FRS, produced a report on roads policing within the last couple of months. I'm talking to the Chief Inspector of Policing later on this week. It's an issue that's on his agenda. He'll reflect it with me. But again, I have discussed this with Craig, and I think Craig will answer your concerns and talk about roads policing, because roads policing isn't roads policing by itself. Other people police roads, although they're not part of a roads policing team. But Craig will explain in detail about this.
Thank you very much. Can I welcome the Chief Constable? Welcome, Craig. You had a long list of things, and I should just add that partway through or towards the end, we've also got Councillor Inglis is wanting to ask a question. So over to you, I think, to tackle the numerous things that have been raised with you.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. Conscious of the time, I made a note while we were going through, so hopefully I'll get everybody's question answered. If not, please just come to me direct. So first and foremost, crime, yes, still down. Was down before COVID, one of the few forces where it was. Knife crime, down before COVID, down during COVID, and still down significantly in the UK. And that's down to a real large amount of team effort. So filming and body-worn video linked to some of the hate crime issues. Yeah, certainly, if all the body-worn was shown, sometimes these incidents can be put into a different light, and that's probably been exemplified in a couple of the instances that the Met seem to be juggling with at the moment. Very fortunately, we've not had those challenges on a local basis, but I would be minded to publicise body-worn video if it meant that the local community could see the totality of an incident, because I think it's important. It stops any hares racing, but also it sort of puts context around some events which certain national media outlets may wish to portray in a different light, let's say, Mike. So stop search, you asked a very good question around stop search, around profiling. Absolutely not. Stop search results, really positive. Increased again the numbers of stop searches, complaints extremely low, reviewed on the body worn video, justified by a sergeant, right place at the right time, and the number of weapons, in particular knives, that we've seized has continued to increase by about 13% actually. So it does show we're into the right people and hopefully at the right time in the right place. Missing from homes down 16%. We have got a very small but important central team who really do try and focus on the repeat missing from homes, particularly young people, try and work actively with them as individuals and engage in communications to reduce the risk, but more importantly to work with the care providers. And certainly if we've got somebody that's an absolute repeat individual where the risk is going up, that's then referred to me and I'll write to the Director of Children's Services and on occasions the chair of the Children's Safeguarding Board in a particular area. To be fair, they are usually young people who have been placed with us rather than our own resident children from the research that we've done. But having a central team who are able to communicate directly with some of those young people is very, very important in reducing the risk. And also it saves an inordinate amount of time for frontline officers in taking the reports, processing the reports, because having a dedicated team at the centre, they become very familiar with where's the likely place we're going to find them and how easy it is for us to get in touch with them. Next item was on, I think it was mentioned around modern slavery, county lines. Is 149% an underestimate? Well, probably not, because through COVID, what we've been trying to do is continue with that work. So we've been working with other forces across the region, British Transport Police, but importantly, we've also been doing some stuff which is a little bit more covert around some of our own, and as Paddy referenced, our homegrown children being used to deliver drugs to different parts of the country. So rather than just looking at what's happening in Nottingham, we're also looking at what's happening in some of our Nottinghamshire children going elsewhere. And that's resulted in some very good recoveries of young people and also some seizures in different parts of the country. So I think that work is only going to increase over time. And as Paddy says, it's rebranded, it was always there, it's just got more in focus. And on top of that, I think the next item was Mike, you referenced begging and the city putting some money in. You know, I really do feel for the city and its finances, Mike, and I think it was really good that that extra money was put in. And I think they're going to find it difficult to find some additional money to go towards the problem. But you can rest assured that we will always be there to help the city try and resolve this problem and mitigate some of the effects. Public drug taking will always demand a police response. And I think that's just a given from my perspective as chief. We mentioned Burcoats. Well, I was in Worksop, councillor, on Friday afternoon in the Queen's building. Fortunately, I bumped into a constable who was one of the Federation reps, actually. He said he'd been moved from Retford on a voluntary basis because there's too many police at Retford. So I have seen the figures. It's never been as busy in Worksop for police officers. So my assurance is that it's only increased. And in fact, we've just taken a bit more space in Queen's building because we haven't got enough locker room. So I think that answers some of that question. Councillor Helen, I think it was, roads policing. The reason Derbyshire have so many is because they have so little demand on other forms of crime. But our roads policing is done by a dedicated unit, plus all our armed responses do roads policing. So we give it quite a bit of resource. Next year with the uplift, as Paddy alluded to, we're also going to be expanding the road crime unit. We get a lot of business on the back of ANPR, and indeed I've been on over the weekend. We've had a couple of cross-border jobs with Derbyshire where we've made some arrests, and we use that to a good effect with the resources that we've got on the ground. So 3 key messages. 1, crime down before COVID, crime down during COVID, crime still down as we're coming out. The incident levels seem to have returned to a more of a normal stage, so about 1,000 incidents we would put onto the system a day. But antisocial behaviour, I know it's been mentioned, Paddy referenced it, lots of people ringing up about individuals breaching the conditions, but we are the 9th lowest force in the country for giving tickets, and there's a deliberacy in that because we want to educate rather than financially penalise. And over the weekend, yes, in extremis, I think I was called at about 1:30 actually, Mike, and the party was dispersed and the householder received a report for summons. And I think that's important though for the council as well, and for all of us, you know, to just remember that's the only one of those that we've done, but we're trying to get people to set the right example and to look after themselves. So appreciate the support on that, Mike, totally. Last point, protest. I think Paddy summed it up. A lot of people are asking me, well, what was it all around? The role of the police is to facilitate that lawful protest. No arrest, quite a few resources. There was a little bit of pushing and shoving, but I think we got more pushes in than we took. And overall, people went home and I went about my shopping as I was watching some of the activities take place. So I'll pause there, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll just check with Councillor Ingus if his thoughts had been tackled in your summary. Councillor Ingus, is there still a question you want to ask?
Yes, well, it's not so much a question. It's really just an observation. Really comes under sort of page 49 to 54 for disciplinary. Just sort of balance the books a little bit, really. It's sort of safeguarding officers. You know, I'm pleased Mr. Guildford's prepared to release CCTV from body cams at an early stage to protect the officers, you know, to put things in context. Unfortunately, our officers, they're under extreme public and often live media scrutiny these days, and the respect factor, I feel, is waning, and the increase on assaults is increasing and worrying. So it's really just a question to the PCC if it's actively supporting sort of, you know, these legal challenges, protecting his officers, other emergency workers, such as the Harper's Law, you know, following the tragic killing of PC Andy Fletcher.
So I made a public statement, Rob, perhaps 2-3 weeks ago, press release around this. We can let you have a copy of it. You'll know that the National Police Chiefs Council produced their long-awaited report on police safety and welfare just last week, and again I'm involved with that, and it's on the agenda for a discussion with the Chief Constable about how we go forward locally on that.
Yeah, that's excellent, Paddy, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Craig, for responding to all those questions. Oh, I've got Councillor Edwards, I think, wants to come back.
Thank you, Chair. And I've learnt enough in these meetings to know that if the Chief chooses not to answer to some of my points, he probably thinks I've got it a bit wrong. So I will not push too hard on that. I do wonder if there is some kind of national role amongst police and other agencies to talk about the confusion that there is in these far-right rallies, because it was very noticeable that the part of the rally that met at the embankment, the police officers on duty, the park officials and local residents did not think the demonstration was political, and then they joined the political demonstration. And I think something nationally needs to be sorted out in terms of getting across to that group what they're joining and what they're part of. And I think there is a worry to keep an eye on in terms of the conspiracy theory and the cults that are developing in social media, that is gaining a bit of ground. And I hope too that we are liaising properly at a national level to do with that. I'm sorry you were woken up at 1:30 in the morning about an incident in the Meadows, but I would just join with you in saying that the inspector rang me 12 hours later to explain something had happened. And actually, the reason it got the profile and that may have got you up at the middle of the night was not a valid reason. It was not the problem that was initially reported. So well done to everybody for putting that into some kind of perspective. And yes, having made some points of criticism, can I congratulate everybody on the way they've handled the Black Lives Matter? I'm sure there are still points that the groups will be making about what they want to see next and everything like that. But it seems to me the police and the police commissioner have been working well on that issue and should be congratulated on the progress which is being made, which is why I still think we've got a little bit of work to do on the anti-Semitism, and I will be picking that up elsewhere. Other than that, I just got a slight concern that there isn't a sufficient culture in the police in terms of sorting problems rather than processing them. And I'll say it again, not necessarily to demand a reply now, but to ask you to reflect on some of the points I've been making concerning that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Leslie Dalby now. Thank you, Leslie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to reflect, I'm glad to see that absence levels are reducing in the report. And can I just say thank you for the comprehensive report that was sent forward after my request at the last meeting. So thanks for that.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, I just got one minor point I'd just like to raise. It's I think it may be just a simple error, but when I looked at the financial pages, particularly page 52 of the bundle, it seemed to me we were given a breakdown of the revenue position for the end of March by department rather than June as we were expecting, and maybe that's just an error in the system, and perhaps you could just send people out an updated one, the June, but maybe you've only done your figures up to the end of March. I'm not sure which.
So what you've got there, Christine, is the final out figures for the last financial year.
Yeah.
What you're asking for is return for the first quarter, and they are just about available now. And I'll make sure that the panel get a copy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I just check that before putting the recommendations, can I check if there are any other questions or comments to either the Commissioner or the Chief Constable? If not, then can the recommendations be agreed? Thank you. Any abstentions or votes against? No, thank you. Then that's carried. Thank you very much to both of you and colleagues. We'll now move on to agenda item number 7, which is national and regional developments. This is an update from the Commissioner on a number of aspects. Commissioner, are you going to just take us through this report? Thank you.
Chair, can I just interrupt a minute? I've got to be excused if that's okay. I've got a national dial-in around the uplift figures. So if there are any questions, I will take them off the Chief Exec and I'll come back to people.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Craig, for joining us today. Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Sorry, Commissioner. I think we sort of agreed you were going to start this and give this report. Is that correct?
So Craig has given a nice introduction. A lot of the discussion, most of my time at the moment, is taken up with the spending review. The process is now well underway. I speak with the Home Office and Treasury most days of the week around the spending review. The aim is to have all the material together by the middle of this month and submitted to the Treasury by the end of September. Then there'll be a period of discussion, and the Chancellor will make his announcement in the November budget around money going forward. So this is a really important point in time, and we're keen to, as they say, seize the opportunity. Some of the issues around the spending review are contained in the report that's before you. So where the desire is to move from the present radio system, airwave, to a new ESN digital voice system over the next couple of years. The costs are tremendous. The timetable is challenging and is a real cause of concern. But as the report says, locally, we're quite well on the case on this and know our own figures. The next item that impinges on the spending review is the National Police Air Support Service. This is the helicopter service, fixed wing service that operates nationally. It's in real financial difficulties. It requires a big capital investment to replace helicopter police, helicopter fleet. Again, it's a big issue, and it's part of the spending review. Traditionally, forensics has been done force by force, but increasingly we're keen to do things on a regional and national level, in part with the private sector, and there are issues around that. And again, it's a matter to discuss during the spending review. The reason that Craig has disappeared is that there is a discussion in real terms now around the amount of officer number of resources that should go into the regional organised crime units, the ROCUs, here in the East Midlands. We're reasonably well placed, probably more advanced than most places. But again, there's a discussion about resources going forward, building on the best, bringing everybody up to standard. And then finally, there's the only other thing I'd note is the East Midland Criminal Justice Service. And I think I said earlier on during the panel meeting that one of the real issues at the moment is the fact that COVID has meant that the courts have not been able to function as well as they normally do. There are delays in the Magistrates' Court. There are delays, bigger delays in the Crown Court. As I said, a package of measures announced this afternoon to try and take us forward on all these things. It won't be easy. It will take us quite a lot of time. And again, it's something that we're devoting a good deal of energy to. So I'll stop at that point, Christine, and answer any question that panel members may have.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for bringing us up to date. Does anyone have any questions or comments they want to raise? I've got Councillor Inglis and then Mrs. Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Just a thing on the National Police Air Support, really. It's just to praise Paddy, really, for his initiative with introducing the drones. Yeah, I think they've been hardly successful. They're within budget. I did spend a night shift out on the drone car with Craig Berry before the lockdown. And I just think the benefit has been really good, and the press that they've given is really beneficial. So thanks for a good initiative, Paddy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sure that's going to be echoed eventually by quite a number of people. Thank you. Mrs. Harding.
Good afternoon, Paddy. I'm just obviously going to ask about the criminal justice system. And I would just like to ask, would it be possible for you to report on what is going to happen in the future, perhaps bring it to the next meeting?
Shall I take all these together at the end, Christine?
I think so, yes, thank you. I've got Councillor Smith next on the list.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My point was the same as the previous speaker around the court sittings. I know other areas have announced that they're going to increase the amount of court sittings that they do in different counties, but Nottinghamshire hasn't. And I know, Paddy, it's probably not a question that you can answer, but is there a particular reason why Nottinghamshire have decided not to increase court sittings where other areas have?
So Christine, if I answer the easy question, the drone question, there's a big debate, Rob, about how far we should be dependent going forward on helicopters and how far they can be replaced by drones. That's an issue that's been picked up in the spending review. The Police Chiefs Council are having a special meeting on the 23rd of September to come to a view on the way forward. I think we'll see an increased use of drones going into the future. The drones we've got are relatively small scale at the moment, but the larger next generation of drones are coming forward. In terms of the court situation, Suma and Helen, I'm going to ask Emma to answer this because she spends, well, it appears to me, a disproportionate amount of her time on this at the moment, but she'll give you an update on where we're at.
As Paddy's outlined, there is the recovery in the court. Well, he mentioned earlier, sorry, that the court recovery that's underway.
I'm not sure everyone can hear you, Emma.
Is that better?
Yes, I'm getting nods. Thank you.
Brilliant. Sorry about that. So I think Paddy alluded to earlier that HCMTS was putting a report together which was basically detailing the recovery plan, which involved various extra provisions to try and catch up on the backlog of cases that had taken place. This has been, I think it's fair to say, a long time coming, and is the result of some frustration from the criminal justice system locally. We've obviously had the announcement of additional Nightingale courts in some areas, and as has been mentioned, additional court sittings that have also been provided. Nottinghamshire has one of the highest amounts of caseloads within the region. The entire East Midlands didn't get a Nightingale court, and additionally, as you've mentioned, there's been no additional sit-ins. So it's a case of we're continuing to make the case to the powers that be ultimately about the additional caseload and the additional capacity which is required within not just Nottinghamshire but within the rest of the country, and that's something that we're continuing to do so. But with regards to coming into the next Police and Crime Panel meeting, we can certainly put together a report with regards to the progress that's been made and the challenges that remain outstanding.
Thank you very much, Emma. Are there any other questions or comments to the Commissioner? In that case, can I put the recommendations to be agreed? Thank you. Anyone abstaining? No, thank you very much. Then that's carried. Thank you. I'm mindful of times, but I'm doing my best. Item 8 is the Home Office review of Police and Crime Commissioners. Well, I think, Commissioner, you're well placed to tell us about this.
So the government's announced that they're going to review the role of police and crime commissioners in 2 phases. Phase 1, which will report probably in November, and phase 2, which will come after the PCC elections in May of next year. You've got before you, Christine, the questions that the Home Office are asking at the moment. I know your national body, which SUMA is involved in the executive on, has already submitted evidence to the review panel. The review panel is internal. It's civil servants working in the Home Office. They're keen to collect views. In essence, what it's about is trying to make PCCs more visible. And if I'm honest with the panel, I think the government are concerned about low turnout figures in the May elections. So that's where we're at the moment. There's an advisory committee which meets for the first time this week. I'm a member of it. We're very keen to get the review dealt with over fairly quick time. there's an issue that I'm sure panel members will perhaps know more about than I do, that some of this work is dependent on the way forward on the white paper on devolution for local councils. I anticipate that white paper will be published in October. It's not clear at this stage what the white paper might say, but clearly it has implications for local authorities, elected mayors and police and crime commissioners. And I suggest, Christine, if the panel agrees, that we come back to this, the issue of the devolution white paper in your November meeting. The second part of the review is around, in particular, going forward on fire governance. We have a patchwork approach to fire governance at the moment. Part one will look at what's happening. Part two, I think, will recommend changes. We talked earlier on about the criminal justice system. There's always been a view that local criminal justice boards could contribute more towards the efficient running of the criminal justice system, and that will be part of part two, as will a topic close to your heart, Christine, probation reform, where it's got to, where we want to go to in the future, the need for probation to work more locally with partners. So all those things are on the agenda just now. Am I concerned about it? Sure, we're going to put good evidence together. I hope the panel will put some evidence in. I know that Keith has already made some comments to the LGA, but I think it's right that after 8 years, there's always time to look at matters, take stock of a situation and make recommendations for change. So I'll stop at that point. I think Keith may have some more information. Certainly Kevin has got some more information if the panel want to talk about this some more.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'll hand over to Keith because, as you rightly said, Keith has approached members and sought views, and I think there's still time for members to put the other views in if they wish. Keith, is that correct?
That's right, Chair. There was a bit of confusion around the closing date. I think it's quite telling that the Home Office have clearly said that they didn't want a wide range of responses. What they wanted was for people to go through their representative bodies. So for ourselves, it was through the Local Government Association and also through the National Association of Police and Fire Crime Panels. We heard after the agenda had been published, actually, that the Commissioner still had the opportunity to feed in members' views. So we had previously emailed round to members seeking their views over the summer. We have fed those in to the LGA, and they are covered within section 11 of the report. And I know the Commissioner was particularly keen to get any panel members' views on question 3 within Appendix B, which was all really about the scrutiny model for PCCs. It does underline at the end of that appendix that the review is definitely not looking at a wholesale review of police and crime panels in so much as taking them out and trying a different approach. So it was really about whether members have got any views on whether you think that the panel's role and powers could be strengthened at all, really. And that's panels in general, not just the Nottinghamshire one, obviously. So it's over to yourselves, really.
Thank you very much, Keith. I think that's a good synopsis of where we are. Are there any further questions or comments? If not, then can I formally put the recommendation to you to be agreed? Thank you. Any votes against or abstentions? Thank you, that is carried. That takes us then to item 9 and item 10. I'll take these two together, really, because what you have before you are the two annual reports. Yours, Commissioner, a large volume that includes all of your objectives and key target indicators, and also our own first annual report as well. So, Commissioner, if you just want to make any comment you wish on your report.
So, Christine, all I would say is it's a fairly lengthy report. There's a lot of material in it. The normal thing that we do is ask the panel to make comment now if they want to, or feed comments into Keith, because as a matter of statute and good practice, the panel need to consider it and write to me. And in the past, that's the pathway we've gone down.
Thank you very much. What's your timescale for us to return any comments to you?
I don't think a month would be unreasonable.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we'll make a note of that and see if anyone's got any comments they wish to make to you. Any comments that people want to raise here and now? We have some time when people have got time to perhaps read more. In that case, then, can the recommendation be agreed on item 9? Thank you. Any objections or abstentions? Thank you, that's carried. And similarly with our own report, Keith, you've done with a number of colleagues a lot of work on this. I want you perhaps to present this, as you've done a huge amount of work, and with colleagues here in the County Council, which I'd like to formally put on record our thanks to.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was very conscious having this on the same agenda as the Commissioner's annual report. It goes from all singing, all dancing to gently humming in the corner and tapping my feet. But I think it's a good first attempt at this. So this is the first time the panel have tried to do an annual report.
Keith, it's quality.
Quality, not quantity. And it was really helpful to have that member reference group around it as well. So that's helped inform, and there's a number of quotes within there. I think it's a good pointer to the future, and I think we'll learn from it. What I particularly welcome members' comments on are on the format of it, on anything to do with the contents, and also it would be helpful to know how far and wide you want to circulate this. I'm very conscious. I've tried to make it plain English. I would ideally like to put it on the web pages on the County Council's website for the panel, but clearly I can share it electronically with members. But if people want hard copies as well, we can arrange for a print run as well. So it doesn't have to be now within the meeting, but any comments back to me again within the next couple of weeks would be really helpful.
Thank you very much, Keith. Are there any comments to Keith on the process to be followed before eventually this small report will be published?
Councillor McRae, chairs.
Councillor McRae, thank you. I've just seen your hand. Thank you.
Yeah, hi there. No, I just want to say thank you. It's even though I don't like the photo of me, never mind. That's the only one you had at the time. I'm just going to make a suggestion. If it could be sent to town and parish councils as well. I know some of them will pick it up. And also, would it be a thought to perhaps even send it to some of the schools, because they are interested in things like that. They can even tag it onto the newsletters. They send them out electronically, and perhaps have some copies in local libraries as well.
Thank you very much. There's some really helpful suggestions. Thank you. I think Keith's made a note of those
yes,
as well.
And I would say as well, Councillor McRae, it's not too late to change your photos. If you want to send one alternative one, I'm sure we can stick it in there. So
yeah, that one was taken at 5:30 in the morning after the elections, and I'd been up for about over 24 hours. I was drained, so I'll try and find one where I'm nice and awake.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. If there are no other comments.
Suma Harding as well.
Sorry, Suma. Beg your pardon. I think you're muted. Are you muted, Suma?
You're just muted, Suma, at the minute.
We can't hear you, Suma. Can you unmute yourself? She can't hear us.
There have been problems like this recently, actually, Chair. I've had similar issues where it looks like you're muted, but you're not, according to your own screen.
Yeah. Can you hear us, Suma?
Right. I think, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I'd just like to say, could it be emailed to the chairman of the bench? Because I think it would be quite interesting for them to email it to magistrates.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm just looking at the hand. Councillor Smith, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Keith, if I'm just being really pedantic, I know on page 11, you've made reference to the spotlight on domestic violence. If I'm just being really pedantic, that just seems to get a bit lost in the page, and it's quite an important part. But like I say, I'm just being really pedantic. But to me, that should have been at the top rather than halfway down, 'cause it just sort of gets lost in it. Sorry.
No, I'll take that on board, Councillor Smith. I'm sure we could start the page with that, and we could perhaps get another photo in there. So yeah, no problem at all.
I think there may be a little bit more that we can add to the paragraphs in light of some of the conversations we've had today with the providers as well as with the Commissioner and people. Any other comments? So you want any comments back to you within 2 weeks, Keith?
Yeah, that would be great. I'll drop an email to the panel, so
thank you.
The people not here today as well are aware. So yeah.
In that case, then, can the recommendation be agreed? Thank you. In that case, that's carried. Can I thank everyone for attending the meeting and duly declare the meeting closed? Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.